discussion. We're going to be talking about forgotten functions. And those are the ones that we don't use every day, but when you remember that they exist, they bail us out of a jam or exactly the right tool for the job at the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually share my screen and pull up the FileMaker Help page. And so as we think of a function, I'll just pull up the help, and that way if it's your function that you're talking about, you don't have to remember everything about the function to tell us. We'll have a little bit of a cheat sheet there. So I don't know if anybody has one that wants to dive in and go first.
Well, actually, I'll comment on one I can even see on the screen. Get a CSS. So with everybody using web viewers and HTML emails and so on, you have to properly tag things to make things work the way you want in different environments. And I didn't even realize until recently that existed. So when I'm trying to figure out how to tag things, I learned that I can, wrap it in get a CSS and see what the tags look like. And then that helps me write what I need to write.
I think I've used it once because I was actually generating HTML or like an HTML email with a plugin rather than through, and that was the function that I ended up using to make sure that it carried over the formatting.
Right.
Another use for get is CSS. So customers said, hey, can you remove the text formatting from this field? And let's just say there were 10,000 records and wanted to run fast. So the loop was, if get a CSS of text, basically, I can't remember the code, use get a CSS to determine if the text was styled or not. If the text hadn't been styled, skip to the next record, no need to change it. And if the text had been styled, remove the styling. So it was using get a CSS to optimize, excuse me, the cleaning of text formatting from only those fields that had text formatting.
That's cool, yeah.
Why not use style remove for that?
Oh, so we were using get a CSS to determine. So one of the things that we found to be quite useful when looping through records and determining whether we should set a field or not is to determine if the value that we're going to set the field to is identical to the value that's already in the field. So it's a speed optimization. Like we'll do, update this field, and in the script we'll have a value and a variable, and then we'll compare the value from the field which we're reading. And since it's already been read because it's already been loaded, reading is cheap, writing is expensive, so we minimize the writing. And essentially it's if this field is identical to what we might set it to, well, don't bother, just go to the next record. So it's a speed optimization. It's a flavor of speed optimization.
And it also protects from getting marked as modified if you didn't really change it.
Yeah, added bonus. If using the built-in modification, then you prevent it. And yeah, Steve, absolutely. If it did need to be cleared, the function would be text remove, the sledgehammer, I call it, of the four. Remove it all, clean it out.
No, it's text style remove.
So text style would remove, yeah, that would remove the style. And if there was size or color or font. So actually it's interesting, Steve, you mentioned this because I'm working on a presentation for Dig FM, which is really centered around text formatting. And so, yeah, and who's ever driving there just brought them all up on the screen, the 10 different functions. And there's 4 different types of text formatting: color, font, size, and style, and lots of different types of styles. And then text format removes them all 4. I guess it depends on what you want. I mean, sometimes we'll remove the font and the size and leave the style. But, they're all there. Very powerful feature.
Okay, that'll work.
Well, we kind of dove into this one last month as part of my show and tell to get layout object attribute. I often forget everything that you can get, the attribute of.
Right.
So I think that's a get function. Correct. I apologize if I give anybody vertigo with my scrolling. must be, is it?
Oh, it's the kind that's, it's not the parentheses get, it's the
So
other
it's-
gets.
No, it's not under
Isn't
get its
it?
record. Is it a text function?
I've used that get layout object attribute to load the contents of web pages, accessed through a web viewer. It's a good way to scrape data.
I think there's a function referenced by alphabetical as an option.
Thank you. So, there's
Logical. Oh, you found it. Oh, by the way, so get layout object attribute is logical. At least it used to be. If they,
Yay, we found it. So there's, so yeah, there's, you can see the list of the number of attributes. And don't use it a whole lot, but every once in a while, it's been exactly what I need. So maybe this may turn in from forgotten functions to call out a function that Todd can't find in the list. So.
so for get layout objects, we've got scrape in a web viewer. You can pick the button location if you're doing a picker button and you want the window to show up next to the button.
I think what I was using it for there last month was to determine whether if the tab I was looking for was the frontmost tab.
The content attribute is the one that returns the all the text on the web page.
The bounds is useful for a button. When you click a button and you want to position the window next to the button, a picker.
Paul, I have a question because you can also use insert from URL to like get the contents of a web page. Because I use that for a database that I built for myself to track my roller coaster riding. So I use it to get information about the roller coaster off of the roller coaster website. Do you know if using the content attribute here is it more efficient than insert from URL, or have you not really tested one way or the other?
No, I haven't tested it. I just found that way that worked for my application, and that was all I needed.
Okay.
You can insert from URL, you would need to check out the container.
Sure, that's true. Yeah.
So you're bypassing the object, the comment objects.
Didn't know you could get the bitmap representation of the chart object.
Oh yeah.
Did you know that was a thing?
That would actually be, because you could get it as a bitmap and then export it.
Right. Or if you want to build your bits as a snapshot.
How does it affect like scientific equations and things like that when you're stripping formats out? That's always been an ugly kind of thing.
Is anybody else on the other end of the line? If any of you used the layout object attribute for getting the chart? I don't know that I knew that. That's something I want to make sure I remember.
Yeah.
I think this was another one that came up last week in our discussion was the buttons and popovers. That if you're calculating the text of a button, you could use this to figure out what it is. So if you needed to use it somewhere else. There's another one. If you use source, you can actually get the XML representation of a chart object. I don't know what you do with that, but it sounds kind of cool.
It does.
Somebody knows more about XML than I do could probably do something with that.
Right.
Anything else on get layout object attribute before we move on? So if you think of something else later on, we can always go back. So what's our next forgotten function? I know another one that I've used a few times. It's a container function. Is the base 64 encode. Because I wanted to build something to where like the user didn't modify the record right from the main screen, like they opened up like a card window or a popover. I forget what it might have even been another like just a modal window because I don't think we had cards at the time. But I wanted to do something that if it would like kind of capture what was there, let them make changes, and then it would force them to either accept their edits or put everything back, which works great for text and a variable. But what do you do if it's one of the things is a document? Well, you can use the base 64 encode to encode a PDF as a 64 and put it in a variable. And then if they decide to cancel, then you can just load the document back from what's in your variable as the base 60 and use the decode. I think those were the functions that I was using. I don't think it was the other, crypt and crypt or any of those, but so I didn't have to have like a container global field or something.
Yeah.
I didn't test it with all types, but I mean, we were specifically dealing with like images and PDFs, so it worked fine with the two functions.
So it's not forgotten, but under the logical functions, it's while, which I was excited when they came out with that, and I find I don't use it. I wish I did. Are there any fantastic uses for while that anybody came up? Or are there times that you quit using something else and use while instead?
It's one of those ones that I've never gotten around
I
to.
just never, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing.
I know it's in some of the things, particularly I think in custom functions people write,
Yeah.
but I've never played with it myself.
Yeah, usually if I'm like updating a custom function that I know is recursive, I will take the time to go ahead and rewrite it to use while. I forget, there was one, partly I just did it to see if I could do it. No. But it's like, if I had to do it again, it's like, no, I would write this as a nested loop in a script, because I was building like an email or something that had like information about the purchase order, but then it listed all the line items in a formatted way. And I was using while to like go out and get related records, but I had to escape stuff and use the evaluate function to get the related data. And I mean, I got it to work. It was very tough to troubleshoot. That's the biggest problem I've found with while is just, it's not like you can pause a script, if you're going through a loop there, but while it's just, it either spits out the result or it doesn't, so I haven't figured out a good way to really do any debugging, but I do use it on occasion. Any other wow success or horror stories from outside? Let's see, I think it was just within the last couple months, I had one that confused me because it was not a solution that I had built originally, but I was looking at it. And yeah, it was this one right here. This function was used, and I was trying to understand why it was used because, it's for our sister company, and there was no reason for Japanese text to appear anywhere in the system. But as I dug into it, what I discovered was that because you can define the separator and the character type, you can actually use it to format a number to put in like the comma for thousands or a decimal point or something like that. And usually I've always written a custom function that takes my number and does the formatting for me. But if you pick the right parameters on this num2j text, it'll do the format for you, and it's a native FileMaker function.
That's cool.
And yeah,
30 years, I never knew that.
yeah, it's like, I'm like, because when I first who in the world put this in here? And it's like, oh, that was kind of ingenious by the time I got to the end. So
Maybe you did.
oh no. As much as I'd like to take credit for the ingeniousness, if that's a word, it was not me originally.
Did you update the comments so that the next time you find it in a couple of years, you're not going to go through the whole thing again?
You know what? Actually, I don't know if I did. I think it was because it was such a eureka moment that's like, well, I'm never going to forget that. So I don't have to, but I probably should have commented. Right. Yeah.
It's future Todd.
Yeah. Yeah. Future Todd will probably curse past Todd when he comes across it. Yeah. Because I think here's the separator. And I think it was like you select the number one option because it's every 3 digits for thousands. And then I don't know if it was a 0 or a 1 for like the third or like the type. I have not gone back and changed everywhere where I've used my custom function to do that same formatting, but this was a pretty neat use. Any others?
I think the design functions in general, sorry about, it's been a long day here. The design functions in general are very useful. And then, so I was actually pick obscure ones. I was working with the value list IDs and the value list names to try and, well, not to try, but to build something that would protect a field on a layout that's got a checkbox, such that if someone dragged and dropped text that wasn't on the value list, it would auto enter and go away, which is pretty hard to explain. But if I had a checkbox with yes, no, maybe, and I drag and drop some text that has a word that's not yes, no, or maybe, it will go into the field with drag and drop, but it won't show up because of the checkboxes. So I was building something to say, hey, look at what's being dragged and dropped. And if the items, filtered values, another underutilized feature, you know, filtered values to throw out everything that isn't on the list. How's that for obscure?
Yes, I didn't even know that that could happen. So that's,
As I think about that tool.
I had a need to choose a near value. Is there a way I could use that? So I've got, let's say, a drop-down list of 1, 3, 5, and then somebody puts a 2 in there. Could you
So
get it?
Dragon, so this actually kind of easy to verify in that you take, you know, sample database or, you know, some scratchy database you're working with, have a field, put the field on the layout. And I'm just going to use checkboxes as an example. It applies to radio buttons, probably applies to menus and lists as well. But let's just take checkboxes. So put the field on the layout, format it to be checkbox, put it in the field again, and format it not to be a checkbox. So you can kind of actually see what's really under the hood.
Right.
The field with a checkbox will only show you values that are on the checkbox list. But if you like, you know, you can even type in the field 1, 2, 3, many, and then hello world. And you can see that hello world's in the field, but it won't show up visibly with the checkbox. So you can
Right.
have crufty data. And if you look at a system that's been used a long time, you likely find some crufty data in there. Not necessarily a good thing, not the end of the world, but not a good thing. So you want to prevent that. So if you, just to prove that it exists, take a block of text that includes, you know, hello world, and drag it right smack on top of the checkbox, the field with the checkboxes, and then it'll say thank you very much. If you do yes, no, maybe as the value list and you drag yes, no, hello world, it will show yes and no checked, and it won't tell you that hello world is there. So the goal is to get the auto enter to fire, and it fires before the validation. So it's kind of nice. And, you know, if you say like, hey, if they drag something that shouldn't be there, just get rid of it. Shouldn't be there.
Yeah. So so if I'm trying to put something in that's not in the list, I'm trying to force it to be one of the values that's in the list.
Okay, if you can do that. I mean, how would you do that? How would you do that?
I don't know. I thought maybe your approach could shed some.
Well, I'm not that clever to say that hello world should map to maybe, or, you know, you could say bad data, or what the heck are you doing?
Alphabetically you could say, all right, it's closest to this one, and choose it.
Microsoft might do it. I wouldn't do it. You know, just like if it's not on the list, it's like be the bouncer at the club, not on the list. And anyway, auto enter fires before validation. So that kind of, you know, is a nicety when validation messages can be a little bit not overly precise. So anyway, so that value list, it works. I'm at the point where I'm just kind of cleaning up the code. Might demo it at the Dig FM meeting in April. I think it'd be worthwhile. Fits in with what else I'm demoing. But anyway, very obscure, but incredibly useful. These design functions in general, scripts, you know, layout IDs, super useful.
so Stephen, did you have, I just saw your hand up, so I don't know if that was.
Yes,
before.
I didn't know we were going to get to do this tonight. I thought you all were going to make a presentation, but I'll tell you about a forgotten function. In fact, it was so forgotten because it doesn't exist, but I needed it. Therefore, I invented it. And it just happens that you see here on the screen the function layout IDs, which, as it notes, returns a list of all layout IDs in the file. But I needed to have the ID for a specific layout. There is no function to do that. But there are properties in the FileMaker application, which are perhaps not well known, which are ordered list. If you have, for example, layout names, it will return a list of all of the layouts in the file in the order that the layouts are in the file. The same for layout IDs. I can get the information, get layout name. And if I can determine where in the list of layout names, what ordinal position, 5th, 10th, 31st, whatever, the name that matches get layout name is, I can take that same ordinal position and apply it to the layout IDs, and it will return the ID of that specific layout. And so I sort of borrowed, improved, or as somebody once said, theft from one is plagiarism, theft from a dozen is research, and found a couple of old custom functions that were done by a developer named Jeff Wells, whom some of you may remember, and several other people, probably 15 years ago. And so I just simply say I pass the layout name through this custom function, ordinal position, and it will tell me that the layout meetings detail is the third layout in the list. Therefore, I can ask the layout ID list, what is the third value? And it won't necessarily be third or 3. In fact, chances are it won't be. It could be 1, it could be 50, it could be whatever, because these IDs are, they don't repeat themselves. And if you delete a layout, it takes the ID with it. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.
And the same thing can be used for other functionalities in the program as well, because as I say, it depends upon these matched ordered lists, and it just so happens that there is no get layout ID function, at least that I've ever seen or heard of. So that's what I did.
Anything else on the design functions? Because I actually just have one that I thought of, but I don't want to jump in front if anybody else has something. I guess the one that I've used is field names, because I've done it a couple different times where I wanted to do like a custom export or collect data into JSON. And the easiest way I found to do that was just to create a layout that had the specific fields that I wanted. And then you can use field names to get the names of those fields. And then you can either set your JSON or loop through a loop and use set field by name and just use that list of named fields. And because I think I used like the field names to get the names, but then I also used the field type, especially like if I was loading stuff into like a JSON object. So that way I could test to see what the type of field was to know whether it's a JSON number or JSON string, or typically only 2 you have to pick between, but I couldn't not have my numbers be JSON numbers, so I had to test for it. So I was setting it correctly, but so those are a couple that I've used a few times. That,
I was just gonna say, like, if you're doing something with like you said, building and loop, and you're going through, so you have a real abstracted, script that can go build that. And the only thing you have to do then is modify layout,
Mhm.
and it automatically runs through cascades now, rather than having to go rebuild scripts, update everything, add through fields.
Mhm.
So it's a nice technique for abstraction.
Yeah.
That's really good.
It's one of the first things I learned from John Mark Osborne when he gave a talk 20 years ago. That was how he would manage some of the stuff, add a field to a layout in the script. That's
Yeah, you had something, Tony?
Sorry, a little slow on the unmute there. So there's a gotcha. Hey, Todd, if you click on field names, if there's a gotcha, which can be, how do you avoid the gotcha? If your layout name is the same as your base table name, problems can ensue. I hope it's the right one, because the parameter that it can take, it can either take the layout name or the table name. I think they kind of mentioned that down the road, down a bit. So what that means is you could have field name. So it'll either reference, let's see, the layout. I know it's a gotcha. It's the layout name and the base table. If they're the same, you get an unexpected result. File name, layout name. Then there it is. The third paragraph, layout name, the name of the layout or table. So there's the gotcha right there. Even though it says in the signature, whatever the heck it says. Yeah, it says layout name. That's not really true. It's layout name or table name. So if you have a layout, so we never, ever name our layouts identical to the table, because if we were to put fields on them and this and that, it would just not work because of the ambiguity. Is this a layout or the table? And I've seen every now and then, every couple of years, it comes up on community. This didn't work as I expected.
I mean, I usually have what I call admin tables that are usually named the same as my base table, but I also create a layout that's like SCR and then whatever the name, because I'm going to use that layout in a script or something, and that's the one that could be referencing. So
yeah, that would actually seem best, because then you've got one layout that you can use to get all the fields in the base table, and then you would have one layout that you could use to get all the fields on the layout, including fields that are pulled into a relationship. So having both would give you kind of everything the function offers you. One other thing on this, another gotcha, this is a perilous function here, is that the file name can, in some cases, if you have two files open, I don't know why you would, but if you do, maybe a local, yeah, who knows why. But if you have two files open with the same name, you can get unpredictable results. And then somewhere in the design functions, not in the individual functions, but in the overall documentation for the design functions, it'll mention that if you, instead of file name, typing in a file name with a string, if you just do open quote, close quote, it will reference the current file that you're in, which is often the one that you want. Although you might be using it to document a system. But anyway, file name can be open quote, close quote, and that can avoid, referencing some other file that was open for some other reason. It's a very perilous function. Use it with care. It's great, but use it with care.
Okay, so you're giving us the Ben Parker speech. Is that great power comes great ability then?
There you go.
Todd used to say that to us all the time. I'll give you admin privileges, but remember.
All right.
I don't get any of my coworkers know that I have admin privileges till after they. No, I can't say that we're gonna cut off.
Anything, anybody else? I guess I don't know if it's necessarily forgotten. I mean, I don't have to do it often. I guess just kind of polling the room is that I found out that if you wanted to find an app, because of how FileMaker stores dates as numbers, if you have a list of dates, you can use min or max to get the earliest date or the last date in the list, and then use the function and get as date, and it spits it back out as the formatted date.
I wish Beverly were here. She could enlighten us on some of this. Perhaps others of you can. A number of these pieces of information can be retrieved by the execute SQL function referencing a location known, I think, as FileMaker tables or FileMaker file. I'm not sure exactly what the syntax is, but you can get, for example, field name, field ID, and field type with a simple execute SQL function. Do any of you know more about that than I obviously do not?
Yeah, I can't say that I do.
Yeah, if you use that for an auditing application, I have to look up the SQL. And it'll return all the table names. Okay. It was not hard to learn.
Okay. Now, I mean, I wonder is there a performance difference between using like the function versus execute SQL? Or are they about the same probably?
I think if you commit the records first, you're okay with that. I don't generally use that on hosted files, but you could. I have that formula somewhere, but it's on a machine, I think, that is now gone to sleep for the day. So, and I didn't write it, Wim gave it to me. So, but I've used it several times to, select from FileMaker table. That looks correct.
Something in the chat.
It was someone in Australia was the first to break the news into the FileMaker community. I forget who, but there it is. Execute select from FileMaker tables. And I think there's another one. I'll go find that. These, by the way, these complement the design functions. There's a little bit of an overlap, but these things do give you something that the design functions can't give you. You can use the design functions to target external files and use it to document a system. Not perfectly, but it'll give you a lot real fast.
Any forgotten text functions, or I mean, it's not forgotten, but all I have to say since I saw it there is I am so happy that unique values is now a native function.
Yeah, that's a good one. 16 and up, very useful.
Data boss would be Andrew Duncan, and he is a very clever lad. He made an excellent presentation at a program several years ago, maybe 2013, I'm going to say, in Sydney, and I was able to be there to see it.
What about, does anybody use this one? Because I think this is a relatively new sort values. So I want to say there, I've seen custom functions that will do this.
Yeah, I've used this with unique because for whatever I was doing, and I wasn't dealing with a huge data set. So I don't know.
Okay.
Do you have a use case for it?
Not really. I mean, I think I have used it once. I think it was something where I was getting the new unique values, but I wanted to be able to show it in like an alphabetical order. So I was like, oh, this function exists now. So, but sometimes because I only use it maybe the one time, I was just interested to see if anybody else had any use cases for it.
I think if you use the design function like database names, I'm not sure they come back sorted. So you might want to get the database names and then sort them and then iterate through them to create a list of database files in the system. Likewise, Windows and so forth and so on. There's one use case.
Yeah, that would work. I heard somebody had mentioned earlier filter values.
Yeah, I think working with value, I'm going to say something controversial here. I think JSON is great. It's awesome for, managing collections of data. I think that there's the value, lists when they exist, simple one-line lists. And there's so many functions that work with simple values, including this one. It's often a little bit of an easier coding path than JSON, which is great, but I think there's competition in the space for how to manage data collections in the FileMaker platform. A good thing.
So I'm just going to keep scrolling down. So if anybody sees something you want to talk about. Oh, here's one. I think I've had to use it a couple times, and it was something that I needed to increment, but it wasn't an actual primary key or serial number or something. I'm like racking my brain. How do I get this chunk off and add one to it and then put it all back together? And I found this. That's exactly what I need. Because I believe it increments the same way as like a serial number would. If it's whatever it can find as the number in the rightmost spot, It just increments by 1. So
But if you had a string like A1, it would increment that to A2, right?
correct.
That's cool. Wow, I didn't know we had that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think I've only ever had to pull it out one time, but I was like, oh, that's handy. Kind of hit on the text formatting functions.
Combination. Oh,
That's for a bunch of math that I've
that's a bunch
forgotten.
of them, yeah.
Mod is what returns the remainder when we divide. I know I've used that just if I wanted to determine odd or even.
Yeah, even or odd. That's, yeah, I use mod for that.
Any-
I've also used mod for dividing up the alphabet into chunks. So like the ABC is one chunk and the EF is another chunk. I forget how it goes, but you can do stuff like that with it.
Anything in the container functions here? Most of the stuff I know about these functions is just enough so that I pass the developer exam.
That counts as using the function.
I mean, I think this function has been here. I don't know that I've ever actually used it. Has anybody ever used like this to verify the container?
So if you had a corrupted graphic in there, it would tell you.
I don't know that it would tell you if the file was corrupted, but it would tell you if it was changed in some way. Or deleted, or like if it thought the value was, in like your external path or something, and then all of a sudden it's not there. Like I've seen it that it's there, but I don't know that I've ever actually used it.
So they rolled it out at 12, which is when they did the external containers or remote storage, or they changed the name a couple times. So it's probably works in conjunction with open storage and secure storage. That said, I have not used it. I'm sure it's awesome. I haven't used it.
It's if you had a load, upload an image of some kind, so like an ID, then it would verify whether or not it was in there, right?
I think that's because every once in a while there's a function in here that there's what it says it does, and then there's what you can do with it. That somebody's found a unique use case. I think but I can't think of any offhand.
So can you set the perimeter for the type of format there?
I don't think so, because the only value or parameter it'll take is the field. That would be nice if you could kind of define, this is how I want you to verify.
Yeah.
That might be a good submit it to the feature request page.
I'll make a wish list.
I'll make your wish list. I know you got your the fonts are at the top of your list, so.
But it does say it'll verify for any text under any.
Yeah.
I wonder how that would work, because there's is valid. So I wonder if you had like,
It exists, doesn't it? And it's not.
it sounds like they would kind of do the same thing that would verify container, like if you had it as like a timestamp field and what was in there wasn't a timestamp, but this would verify container give you a truer result than just is valid.
I wonder if it's,
Well, the other one will tell you if that field value was changed. So if a record was changed,
right.
you don't know which field was changed. Container will tell you that it was changed.
Yeah, it was like if the contents were edited outside. So if you have a reference, your container fields will be in a drive, and then somebody opens that from somewhere else and makes a change to it, then I guess that's what it's somehow looking at it, it's capturing something in the record itself, like it's file and parameters for the file stored in the record that it can
That's
check
the point
against.
to the tool that you created
to see if
for
there's a change to it.
evaluations and modifications. So,
Perhaps.
yeah, so some of them have a funny document. Some of it's container. They're always fun.
A very common use for this function is to determine whether there are related records to a parent record. Is valid true means that there is at least one related record. There could be more. Is valid false or zero means that there are no related records for that parent record. There is a slight performance hit to this for a large number of records on hosted files, but it can be quite useful.
Mismatches. I guess it's a skill type mismatch. So I guess I could base it off of the file format type as well.
Okay, well, I guess we've been going at it for about an hour, which is usually the amount of time we reserve for the official part of the meeting. So anybody else have any functions they need to get off their chest before we move on with one more thing?
The get selection. Oh, there was a bunch of get functions, probably too many to go over, but get selection, expect a, that's going to be presented Dig FM in April. Part of building a text editor, get selection, and associated. Let's see, this get selection pairs with a script called set selection. Oh, I'm sorry, it's all get active selection, I think.
And use that to determine cursor position.
Yeah, like if you highlight a field, there we go. Thank you. All these, there's like a suite, like 3 of these. Get active selection size. What else is there? Active, something underneath it, maybe. Active. Right. So between the start and the size, that actually tells you everything you need to know. If you know the start, you know the size, you know the end. And that can give you, so if you in a field, and this is what I'm working on for April, you highlight a word and then you can change its formatting, text formatting, or you can add text. You can make an HTML editor. That's what I'm going to do. So that's a sleeper function. That's an underappreciated function, but not for long, because I'm going to give it some love.
Sounds good.
I'm curious if there are any custom functions anyone always puts in every solution. Any particularly loved custom functions?
Get layout ID.
I always do a phone function. Did they ever come out with, they haven't come out with a native phone formatting function yet, did they?
I don't think so. Yeah, that's one I usually add. Usually number formatting until I found out that I could actually do it with the Japanese function.
Yeah.
I have an additional custom function called forensics, which, as the name suggests, returns a lot of data about who did what, where, how, and when to the file, more so than who created it or who last modified it. It gives timestamps based on the server, not the user's workstation. It tells the IP address of the user. It tells the version of FileMaker Pro that was used. And it's a forensics tracking function. And a lot of people probably don't have much use for that, but in certain environments, you need to be able to have that documentation. And you just attach it to something that will trigger it and display the results in a field in the record.
Oh, is that a custom function that you developed, Stephen, or is that something that's we could find on like Brian Dunning's site or one of the other custom function sites?
I don't know anything so much about Mr. Dunning's site. No, it's something that I developed, that uses the, there's I think there's a function get system IP address and, get application version and items like that that would
Seems like a lot of like these functions that you're looking at right now and kind of built your own custom function so you could call it once and get everything you wanted.
That is correct. And it has the user's account name. There's system IP address, for example, and system NIC address. We want to be able to know what machine was used to, create a record, to modify a record, to do things, so that if we have a user connecting from a machine that we don't expect that user to be connecting from, we can track that down. Some of that information is, of course, easily extractable from the server access log, but belt, suspenders, and a rope around my waist. So that's sort of the approach we'd use.
Well, that's very cool. It's certainly food for thought to put our own together. Yeah. But there was one as we were scrolling down through the list, the one that, and this was, I guess, this was truly I don't know if forgotten function is the right word, but it was a hidden function. That I want to say for the longest time, this function was there, but it wasn't part of like the published help to get like the milliseconds. And so I had found out that that function existed. So I would use that to figure out the milliseconds if I was like write my own like kind of like system log. If I was doing an export and said I started here and ended here, I wanted to get the milliseconds. Well, now it's an actual function that you can use to figure out the milliseconds and everything. So
Seconds aren't good enough for you, are they?
they are not.
I put that in sometimes for checking the speed of the script running.
Mhm.
And that's pretty close.
Yeah, because if you can measure the execution of a script in seconds, it's like you need to do something about the script.
Yeah.
Or your WAN. So. All right. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, I guess we'll just slide into one more thing. Stop sharing the help. No, I'm not going to go into. So I know Beth, you had one more thing you wanted to ask Beth Jack from Duquesne.
Oh, well, I do too, but she can go first.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, okay. I had sent an email about it, but basically we have someone that's on a Mac, using a Mac on FileMaker, and he is able to send emails when he's using Mac Mail, but he hasn't been able to get it to work with Outlook Client. But I use a Dell and I have no problem with Outlook Client. So he was just wondering if anybody would know if there was a setting or something that he needs to change in order to use both mail systems.
Does he have Outlook set as the default application? That's the thing. Mail is usually the default application on Apple, on Mac.
Oh,
So it's going to open up on your default applications for email. And you can set that on your in your preferences.
so he can only use one at a time? Like whatever the default is?
Yes.
You can only use one as
Okay.
one at a time as a default.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if he wants to use Outlook Client, he would have to switch the default to Outlook rather than Gmail. Or I'm sorry, Mac Mail.
Yes,
He
that's
can
what
use
mine.
Mac Mail, but if he sent a mail from a database, it would go out through the default one.
Gotcha. Okay, I will let him know that. Thank you.
I guess I have a question, Beth, because I know we do things to send emails all the time. Now, is like the mail client opening, or is it just sending through like the account? Because there's a way that you can script it so that it's sent directly through the SMTP server, but you don't get a chance to like preview the mail on your desktop. I guess I assume that's what he's doing, where it's like generating the text of the email, but he's able to proofread it before he actually sends it.
I mean, I know that's
Okay.
that's the way I use it with Outlook. So I would presume he wants to see it before he hits send.
Yeah, then, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of experience with sending it through the client, but that's probably what it is just that it's trying to send through the default mail client.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Miss Lana.
So the other Beth has a question, that's me, and it's also email related.
Okay.
I have a script that is sending HTML email. And when it's sent to my office Outlook address, the logo comes out nice. But if it goes to Gmail or Yahoo, it does not come out as a logo. It comes out as that little icon that shows a broken image. So it's base 64 in the HTML to configure the image. But is there something with different email services that you need to put in your HTML or something to tell it what to do with that image?
I have a question, Beth. It's you're on the Gmail stuff. Is it defaulting to displaying images in line? Like are other images coming up, but just not that one?
Well, there is only the one image in this particular email, so I don't know. I haven't tried putting multiple images to see if one works and another doesn't. It's just the logo at the top in the message.
How are you sending HTML email? Insert from URL or?
Yeah, insert from URL.
So you're sending it using insert from URL to send an HTML through an API to the service?
I mean, there's SMTP settings. I started with a template app that somebody created. I don't remember who it was out there, had an HTML example, and I played with it and just, popped in my information. And so it's kind of the standard. I don't have it on this laptop. I can't share my screen. Yeah, there was a starter file out there, that
I think
somebody
maybe
built.
Fabio for Beeswax wrote an article. Maybe that's the one.
That might be the one. But if I test with that and their image, it works, but my image doesn't. But again, it works for my Outlook email, it just doesn't work for other.
Now, are
providers.
the images, like their image from the test and your image, are they in this like the same format, or
Is it,
is it like?
It's just it's a simple logo. That's the only
But I'm
image.
just wondering if like bitmap or JPEG or SVG or something like that. There's some kind of like the actual type of image
OGB as
file
opposed to
is-
CMYK, all kind of fun
Oh,
stuff.
gotcha. Yeah, so maybe the file type,
Mhm.
it doesn't like the file type. That's a good point. I can
That's
make
one thing
sure
I
it's what PNG would be the best to use, or
PNG as an RGB would probably be your best bet.
so I'll just make sure the image is
And
converted
then
to
also
PNG.
72 DPI,
Now,
also check that. As silly as that sounds, I had something that was 74 as opposed to 72, and it wouldn't display on some systems,
Huh.
which was weird.
Okay.
Because it was written into the source code of that application, it only displayed PNGs, 72 DPI. I was like, extra difference.
Yeah, because I've not done a whole lot with sending HTML emails.
Mhm.
And what I have done is via a plugin, because this was in the era before insert from URL was
Right.
an email option. But like I said, that's the only, if the one image worked and the other one didn't, see what the differences are between like the,
Yeah, I mean, it's the same
resolution and
image, it's just different email clients respond to it differently.
like the original image from this sample worked in all cases. I didn't get any information on what that image is like.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should run the test again with the original sample image and those same 3 email clients and see if it breaks anywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You might be able to just look at the source file too, of that image, and it would get information that would tell you the dog's burning and all that kind of stuff.
Anyone else have one more thing? Well, I guess this is probably the time to let you all know that I'm writing a book. It is a how-to manual on safely falling down the stairs. It'll be a step-by-step guide.
We're reeling from that comment.
All right.
I can give you actual graphics if you need. I'm an expert. So.
It's a Chumbawamba thing. You get knocked down, but you get up.
All right. All right. Anybody have anything else before I wrap it up for us? Let's see. Well, survey results. Last month we asked, with the new year being 1 month old, which FileMaker-centric resolutions do you plan to pursue for the balance of 2022? And there was quite a wide range of what people said they were going to look at. But the winner was people wanted to make smarter apps. I don't know what that says about their users if they want to make their apps smarter, but there you go. Second question we asked was just how do you create a new FileMaker solution? So there's,
What? Nobody uses the starter solution?
yeah, a few people. Somebody used a sample. We'll use one of the templates from the
I
marketplace.
just still closets on water stuff. It works pretty well for me.
But the majority either have their own starter solution that they've maintained over time and start there, or we just all start from scratch. So,
At least you said you did.
And you start pulling everything.
and then the last question was in honor of February status as National Snack Food Month. And of course, the Super Bowl was last month as well. Is which of these popular snack foods are among your favorites? So all of the 10 most popular snacks in America got votes. But, Doritos was the winner, followed by Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, which I could certainly understand. Surprised that M&Ms did not rank higher on the list, but
Peanut definitely would be up
there
higher.
you go. But yeah, so our next meeting will be first Wednesday of April, April 6th. Again, we'll plan to do a hybrid meeting where we'll have in person and then online both. Second announcement is that we were talking about it at our last meeting, and then unfortunately the following day, Claris announced that Engage 2022 is being moved to an online only format. And then more details are coming. So unfortunately, that is not an option this year. And then the last important date is that the Batman comes out on Friday. So, the more I've seen the previews, the more I think I may have to see this movie. So, yeah, so our topic for next month is still to be determined. Hopefully a show and tell. But we will keep you posted here. Probably within a couple of weeks, we'll get the announcement email out as to what exactly our content will be. So that is all I have. Does anybody have?
So that's what it looks like in Gmail.
Remember one more thing that they wanted to share, or?
It's just a broken.
Put on Outlook, it's the logo.
Mhm.
So we'll make sure that the follow-up email will probably be out. I don't know if I'll get it out by tomorrow, hopefully by Friday, and I'll include all the information from the chat for additional resources if anybody wants to do some more research on anything. So, yes, with that, we'll adjourn and see you all next month. So, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for the show.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Appreciate the help.
Right.